ready for America's freedom.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching the John Woodard Show. We have the distinct pleasure of interviewing Ken Cuccinelli. Ken's had a terrific element of politics and law and a variety of other things in his life. And he served in the Virginia Senate representing Fairfax County from 2002 to 2010. And then he was elected the 46th Attorney General of Virginia from 2010 to 2014. He was a Republican nominee for governor of Virginia, losing to Terry McAuliffe. And then President Trump picked him to be the acting Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security from 2019 to 2021. Tremendous record of accomplishment. Now he's a traveling attorney and running all around and making TV appearances and everything like that. So life's pretty good, isn't it, Ken?
Well, as I tell folks, I measure how I've got my life back by the fact I've gone from 4 phones in the Trump administration down to 1. And there's a border crisis, but they're not calling me at midnight on Sunday night about what to do about X problem and Y problem. So it's one of the benefits of losing. I hate to say it, is it frees up those of us who are trying to make it matter, our time. What you mentioned, losing to Terry McAuliffe 8 years ago, that was terrible for the Commonwealth of Virginia, but it was great for the Cuccinelli family. So that's the trade-off, right? That's the trade-off. So,
well, it's like a friend of mine told me down here. He and I were both running for the North Carolina House, and we both lost the first time around by about 1,400 votes or something like that, very narrowly. And then 2 years later, he called me and said, "John, you know, with all the redistricting, I think that this is your old district, and if you want to run again, then I won't. But if you don't want to run again, I will." I said, "Hey, Bob, you go and take it. You know, this is more your cup of tea than it is mine anyway."
And was that Bobby who I met down in North Carolina?
Huh?
Was that Bobby who I met down in North Carolina?
No, sir.
Different.
Bob Steinberg was the man I was referring to, and he's a state senator. But he has told me many times that he got the worst end of the deal when he got elected.
That's funny. So I ran against a guy in my first race in a primary who was a friend of mine. We were better friends after than we had been before, which speaks to his quality being on the losing side. And he used to tease me about how he got the better end of the deal as well.
What are you, I know that you're traveling a lot, and I see you on TV once in a while. What can you tell me a little bit about some of the cases that you're working on? And
so there are 3 basic things I'm doing right now. One, first and foremost, I'm working on election transparency, where we're working all across the country to try and improve state laws on transparency and security so that everyone, and as we measure it, most especially those who lose elections, have confidence that the outcome was an accurate expression of the voters' will. Sound pretty simple, right?
Absolutely.
And if the losers can be confident in it,
should be simple to understand, but it's much more complex than that.
Well, elections are complex. They're not nearly as simple as people think, including those who go through them frequently and who make policy, which becomes the most dangerous person out there on the policy front is one who thinks they know everything and doesn't. people who do know a lot, can discuss the differences and what they think is best. But if they believe they know things that are not true, you can really mess things up. So I spend a lot of my time working on securing elections. We've had a lot of success out in the states. The states I focus on are Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Nevada, and Arizona. Those are the 10 that I primarily focus on at the state level. In Washington, we're playing defense, just trying to keep Washington from taking over these stupid elections, doggone it. And that's a pretty desperate situation with a 50-50 Senate. I also work and I do that with the Election Transparency Initiative, electiontransparency.org, which is a project of the Susan B. Anthony List, the biggest pro-life grassroots organization out there, and the American Principles Project, which is sort of a sister organization that does pro-family, socially conservative work. So that's item one. Item two, I'm a senior fellow for immigration and homeland security at the Center for Renewing America, which is a relatively new think tank started up by Russ Vought, who was Donald Trump's head of OMB, Office of Management and Budget. They control the money. Russ is a very smart
saw when
guy.
I got an email from him when you were brought in.
Yeah, Russ is a very solid thinker. He's an accomplished professional and a solid leader as well. So, and then last but not least, you mentioned I've been practicing law for a long time. I'm still doing that. My favorite case at the moment, I'm suing the House of Representatives over their fines for magnetometers for congressmen. They're requiring congressmen to go through magnetometers to enter the floor of the House, and they fine them if they don't. Strangely enough, only Republicans get fined. How about that? And so we're in litigation on that, awaiting a ruling on a motion to dismiss from the other side. So more to come on that.
Well, this the whole situation, if the way the election came down the last time, Donald Trump finds himself in a position where a lot of the Republican Party are behind him, but there's a big segment of the Republican Party that wish he would just move on. What are your beliefs on that?
Well, first of all, I think if the Republican Party becomes the party of the working man, which was the central push of Donald Trump, we will be the dominant party in this country for a long time in the future. But, if you look at Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, it's not a personal judgment. You don't naturally think of them as leading the charge for the ordinary working man, right? So McCarthy has shown a little more willingness than McConnell to start moving in that direction. But the real test is going to be after the midterms, when at least the House is Republican majority, maybe the Senate as well, because it's easy to complain in the minority, right? But when when you can actually control the direction, do they actually continue to fight against illegal immigration? Do they fight for ordinary Americans in both domestic policy and foreign policy? If they start doing that, I'll tell you what, the near-term future for the GOP, I mean like the next 10 years, would be very good. And maybe I stop telling my joke about why I'm a Republican. I'm a Republican because they're wrong less. And that's the best I can do. I'm perfectly comfortable working with Democrats on those occasions when they are right. But they're wrong even more than the Republicans. It's that thrust of Donald Trump that really needs to continue, whether he's a candidate or a nominee or not. That is the key question for the whole right of center world going forward.
Well, there's a lot of people that believe that he's going to run again. He's not officially announced, but he's raising money like he is, and speaking as if he is when he's out on doing these rallies all over. But there's a lot of people that I think the election was stolen. But I know a fellow that worked on the cyber team to prove that point. And while he has been under attorney-client privilege with respect to what he found, he told me that they've nailed it. But I just don't, right now, I just don't know if the public, even if there was overwhelming and convincing evidence that the election was stolen, I don't know if the public would just say, oh, ho, hum, it's over now, just forget about it.
Well, for the last election, as a legal matter, it is over.
Oh, yes.
The real question is, when you uncover these problems, and we've seen some in Georgia, and as much as the Arizona audit had its own problems and was ridiculed when it came, the numbers hardly changed. Well, that's not what an audit is about. That's what a recount is for. The audit found areas that are potential problems on the order of thousands of voters, or alleged voters, or potential voters. You can call them what you want. It's running those to ground and fixing those problems are why you have an audit. And Georgia is gradually uncovering different things, some of it coming out in litigation, about problems with their last election. And it's fixing those things that is the opportunity going forward. There's no opportunity to overturn the last election. That has come and gone. And it's one of the reasons I say it's so important. Look, I was an attorney general. If you think of other crimes, we punish people for stealing after the fact. That's really it makes sense there. You're not going to stop everyone and search everyone on the street and so forth and do all these things to stop them from stealing on the front end. But with an election, once that ballot goes in the ballot box, you can't get it back out. So even if you prove fraud on the scale of thousands of votes, or mistake, or incompetency, they can be any combination of things that's bigger than the margin of victory. Now you've called into question, as I think people have in Arizona and Georgia at least, you've called into question whether the result was an accurate reflection of the voters' will, to my earlier comment. But you can't connect a bad act with a particular ballot and thus pull them out. So your only option, if you're a judge, and imagine being a judge for a moment and stepping away from this election. You have a case in front of you, and your only two options, if you find fraud, are to do nothing or to literally throw out an election. That is a very hard thing to ask a human being to do. And so to your point about level of convincing, that judge is going to have to be really convinced. And judges have thrown out elections in this country. They've done it. They've been convinced of it, much like you described. But the last election is over. We still would like to see all the learning from all the, I'll call them mistakes, or which includes fraud and every other kind of thing that was going on, and fix them all and change the system so those can't happen again. I think one of the challenges for President Trump, if he runs again, will be to be forward-looking in the campaign. I mean, the media is going to want to just drag him back to 2020 and have him talk about that. But every election is about the future. Joe American wants to know, how does electing you make my life better? And you've been in that position as a candidate. And that's a forward-looking question. Now, you can judge who's going to do a better job with the old Ronald Reagan quote, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When we get to 2024, the answer under Joe Biden, absent a radical change of direction, is going to be no, I'm much worse off. And that plays a big role in the future-looking decision. But voters aren't going to punish Joe Biden for the last 4 years in 2024. They're going to decide, how am I going to do best for the next 4 years? So he's got a lot to say. And believe me, I was in his office having these conversations both before and after November. So I'm familiar, and we had some very productive conversations. But But for an election, we're going to have to look forward, and he's going to need to look forward. I do think the most critical thing, as I said, for the GOP as a whole, because this is all bigger than one person, is that working family focus that Donald Trump brought, with the most spectacular break being on illegal immigration. He was not against legal immigration. We had the highest levels of legal immigration we've ever had under Donald Trump. But there are plenty of Republicans in office. You have a couple of senators there in North Carolina who are, they would not admit this, but I think they're all too comfortable with illegal immigration to the extent it helps business. And if you're in business and you can get cheaper labor, who doesn't want that? But what doesn't get talked about is how that screws American poor people. And we should be writing policy that helps American poor people without subsidies. It's just in the form of opportunity, right? And Donald Trump's tough policies protected the lower end of the economic scale from illegal immigration so their wages could rise, and they did. And we on the right don't focus enough on the benefits of our policies to poor people.
Well, Donald Trump, as you well know, expanded the Republican base dramatically by bringing in more of the working man into the party than had ever been the case before.
People who hadn't voted in forever or a long time came out for him. Yep.
And they still want, and I think they'll be back for him again as a. They like him, they liked his accomplishments,
yeah,
and they want to right a wrong, so I think that he's got. Anybody, I don't know, anybody would be foolish enough to get in a primary race against him. Who he's going to select for vice president would be a real key figure. But he's got all of the qualities, and he's got an adverse, candidate against him. If I don't even think Biden's going to run again.
I don't either.
And I can't believe that the Democratic Party is going to nominate Harris, but they probably will. They talked him into nominating her for his vice president this time. But the point is that I think that he's got all of the all the chips are aligned just right if he can manage to put the 2020 election in the rearview mirror and talk about the future.
I think there's a strong case to be made for that. I think it's a big if, though. It's one of my concerns.
Yeah, me too.
Time will tell. Time will tell. He's not going anywhere, and he's no wilting flower. We're hearing from him, week in and week out, and I don't think that's a bad thing for America. I think that's a useful voice to have on the scene. But as I said, I think the biggest and most important element to go forward is the true, not fake, true focus on ordinary working Americans for the GOP. And frankly, America would be better off if the Democrats then competed on that front for that kind of support. If we're all fighting to be the best we can for that part of America and regrowing the middle class, including by raising people up out of poverty into the middle class, that's how America will do as literally as well as we possibly can, is get those two parties fighting over who can deliver that the best. And, the GOP, I would hope, would try to deliver it by creating opportunity. The natural instinct on the left is to deliver it by sort of buying your way into the middle class. But you and I both know that's not possible. The government can help keep people in poverty from starving and from not having health care and so forth, but it can't even run the printing presses enough to put out enough money for everybody to get into the middle class. The only thing that does that is free market capitalism. And the way that happens in America isn't because government does something, it's because it gets out of the way. And that's what needs to be happening more of. And that is not what this current administration is doing.
What do you think about the current circumstances? Everybody talks about the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, the fact that Bill Gates and other billionaires are buying up farmland in large quantities, and all of the social elements and financial elements that are coming out of the White House, all seeming to point that they're trying to drive the American people into the socialist corner while they still can, because they know they're going to lose the election in 2022.
Well, as you and I talk, here we are in the middle of October 2021, and what you're talking about and describing is sort of all on the table right now as part of the budget reconciliation debate. And, in yours and my lifetime, our American government has never been so closely divided. I mean, you have the Democrats, yes, have the majority in the House, but by the smallest margin that I believe has ever existed in my lifetime. Meanwhile, over in the Senate, it's literally a 50-50 tie. And that is a hair's breadth of an advantage to the Democrats. And yet many of them are trying to push an agenda that is so radically distant from from the center of our American political spectrum, with that kind of bare minimum majority. The only explanation is that they believe this is their only shot. They have demonstrated, look at Obamacare, Nancy Pelosi is willing to sacrifice, in that case, a quarter of her entire caucus to get this transformational legislation through. Wouldn't it be nice if our side had that kind of commitment?
Well, you got to give the Democrats their due on two fronts. They all sing from the same sheet of music, and they repeat the talking points over and over and over again, and they always stand with each other. You don't have anybody going rogue except maybe Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin to some degree. I don't really know how much credence to put in that, but nevertheless, the rest of them are in complete lockstep. You got to give them credit for that. Wish we could do something like that.
Yeah, generally they are much closer to that. It's not absolute, or you wouldn't have the Manchin-Sinema difference. And by the way, they're the ones high profile. I think, believe it or not, Dianne Feinstein, John Tester in Montana, they're not real comfortable with the idea of getting rid of the filibuster. And then there's a couple others who are worried about it because of their own elections. Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, Raphael Warnock in Georgia, Mark Kelly in Arizona, and same state as Kristen Sinema. So they're Democrats who don't want to be identified as being against getting rid of the filibuster because their radical left base turns on those people, as we're seeing. I mean, Kristen Sinema is being harassed into bathrooms. I mean, this is behavior that people should be arrested for, But so it's not complete, but they're a lot more lockstep than our side is, for sure. And they're marching to their base's drum. When we see lockstep on the GOP side, it's to the establishment drum, which is one of the changes that Trump helped. He didn't change it in the party, but he made other paths be taken occasionally. So, and I think some of that is very permanent, particularly his effect, strangely enough, on foreign policy and the neocon path of always wanting to fight a war. And we can rattle off Republican senators who fit in that category. Well, that camp has shrunk. And even those still in that camp, their level of enthusiasm for it has come down. And I think that is another lasting legacy. I consider that to be the same as making policy that's best for working men and women. That's who fights our wars. You know, that's who funds our wars. So I see that, and Trump's pugilistic nature in trade, moving the Republican Party away from pure free trade. And 25 years ago, I was a supporter of pure free trade. The problem was, and you live in North Carolina, I live in Virginia, in the southern part and western part of our states, we saw what NAFTA did.
Yes.
And I learned from the real world that a fair trade approach makes more sense for ordinary Americans than a pure free trade. And it's taken the GOP, the Donald Trump experience, I think, for that to become a majority position in the GOP. And I think it is now. So foreign policy too.
Speaking of foreign policy, there's the way that Biden pulled out of Afghanistan has changed the dynamics tremendously, and there's a lot of folks out there that are following, the rhetoric that the United States can't be counted on for the future, and I'm sure that the Taiwanese are having quite a debate about that right now. So I just don't know where things are going, and I don't know if we've got to make sure that the election goes our way in 22 and 24. I don't think if we get past 24 and nothing's changed, the country will never recover from it.
Well, a couple of thoughts. First of all, I think it is a statistical certainty that the Republicans will take the House of Representatives in 2022.
That I agree with, of course.
The only real question is, will they get to a majority in the Senate? I think there's a good chance of that, but at most they'll have like 53 seats or something. And you're still going to have your Lisa Murkowskis of the world who, back to your lockstep comment, aren't necessarily going to be there with everybody else, but and we'll see how much of the tough talk we've heard out of the House Republicans holds in that position. And so that's key, and it can make a very, very big difference. But 2024, I think that, unfortunately, every so often America has to go through this, and we have to be reminded of just how destructive socialists and liberals are to this country. And assuming we don't shoot ourselves in the foot, which we're always capable of, I think that a Republican nominee in 24 is going to have a very good shot, especially if it is Harris. And I agree with you. I don't think it'll be Biden. I think it's so obvious that he is not capable of this, that they'll talk him out of running again. And Harris will be the most likely opponent. And she's going to bear the burden of this record, all with what I believe America is realizing is not a lot of capability.
Absolutely. And of course, one of your main jobs in the Trump administration was, the southern border, And I think there's been so much said about that. I just don't know that there's anything more I can ask you that's going to be intuitive. But if you've got anything to say about that, go ahead.
Yeah, it's painful to see. It's easy to build. I'm sorry, it's hard to build. It's easy to destroy, and all they've done is destroy policies and programs that work to create an open border society. And that's no nation at all. The most basic element of sovereignty is protecting your own borders, and this administration is refusing to do that. So that's very sad to see. I really would like to see states be more aggressive, both legally and in terms of logistics. For instance, Texas, Arizona should be using their local authorities to remove people who invade their states back over to Mexico. That authority exists under the Constitution. It should be used. And so there's still more that can be done there, but it is painful to watch.
Yeah, I like Greg Abbott, but he's going to have a real challenge in his next election, and I don't. It seems like he doesn't know whether to turn left or turn right. So it's going to be very interesting. What do you think about the finances of the country? Besides what we're seeing, do you believe that this is an attempt to try and drive the country into socialism, or is it that they're using these financial measures such as taxes and low productivity and getting more people on the public dole? Are they just trying to push us that way, or is there some other method?
Look, there are a lot of things I think they're doing to push us that way, but they're assuming a way that the financial foundation of this country will never have a problem. And we're $29 trillion in debt. It's a mathematical disaster. Both parties own a lot of responsibility for this. I mean, the Democrats spend more than Republicans, but Republicans can't say, well, under us, we balance the budget. That's not true. I've been impressed with the American people that they have so quickly equated high government spending to inflation, because even under President Trump, when we did the COVID bill, 1.9 trillion, I use that one because I know it well. I don't know the Biden ones. 2/3 of that money was printed. Only 1/3 of it, the debt, was sold on the open market, and it was completely over and above tax revenues. So that's even worse under Biden. And every time we print money, the government prints money, your and my money loses value. And the American people have come to understand that very quickly. That's not being reflected yet in their votes, I don't think. But we've hit a point now under Biden where I think it actually matters to people. It's not going to decide an election, but it does weigh against him. And unfortunately, as I said, it's not like the Republicans can claim clean hands here.
What do you think about this critical race theory? I've been following this very heavily because
Hey, John, I got to interrupt.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got to rely on editing. I got a 5 o'clock call I got to get on.
Okay.
I got to jump out.
Then we'll go ahead and conclude then. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a great interview, and I hope that you'll have enjoyed hearing from Ken Cuccinelli. He's a very knowledgeable man. He works very hard, and I hope that you'll pay attention when he speaks and when he's in the news. Give him your attention. Ken, thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, John. Good to talk to you. You have a great day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.